it's there you go.
And we are live. It's Casual. Welcome back. And Jonathan will bring us in as always. Play us a little tune.
All right.
All right. Wow. We have a very special show tonight. We're giving it to one guest. He is a veteran of comedy, decades of comedy. I actually put on one of our ads that maybe he was a 45-year veteran of comedy. I think I'm going to have to apologize for that one.
Oh, no.
A little later.
But it feels like 35. It feels
but he has
like
been in comedy a long time. I've been in since '88, and I know he's been in longer than I have. If you ask any comedy, they'll be able to tell you about Eddie Brill. He's just one of those really nice guys you meet on the road, and I unfortunately never got to work with him here in Florida. He actually did some time here in Florida, and I never got to work with him, but I met him on Clubhouse, of all places, just not long ago, and we hit it off, and I love his shows there. We're going to talk about those a little later. Let's run a clip of him from 1986 doing a comedy bit.
Okay.
You know what the hardest language to learn in the whole world is, you guys know? English in America. You believe that? The truth. If you don't believe it, I'll prove it to you. We have to take English in school. People major in English in college. Like, aren't you from here? Yeah, but I really want to learn it good. I mean, well. Or is it good? Well, it's all well and good. Yeah, I just want to learn the language. English is the language that dares you to learn. The rules are so vague. I before E, except after C. Yeah, what about leisure and seizure? All right, screw that rule. All right, let's learn the vowels. A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. When Y? Sometimes. All right, we're ready for the exam. Why do some letters sound like other letters? Why does the X sound like the Z? Why isn't xylophone spelled with a Z? Would they run out of Z's that day? Very fine musical instrument you got there, but we already have 0, zebra, and zip code and ran out of Z's, so we'll give it an X, make it sound like a Z, we'll change it later. There are 3 ways to spell 2. 2 ways to spell 1. Fiction and nonfiction are 2 separate words, and fiction means not a real story, and nonfiction means not. Let's make it a little easier on the kids. What do you think?
Okay, great. Fantastic. So that's the kind of thing this guy does. He's a comics comic. Let's bring him on up here. Please welcome Mr. Eddie Brill.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you.
There he is.
Yeah.
You know, when you were talking about the clip, I thought it was a different clip. I was telling you, 86, I was in Boston, and that was a different show. This one, I'm wearing this ridiculous outfit that I had bought when I was working, I think in Orlando or Jacksonville. I went to like the oak tree in the mall and bought that jacket, and it was, I can't believe, you know, but it was the 80s, so at then I was cool, but I don't know about cool, but you know, there was a good excuse that I had a hockey haircut and that outfit, but I can't, yeah, that's, I started, and you were talking about starting, I started really in 1984. I was in college. I was in college, and in the late 70s, and I was in a comedy group, comedy and sketch, and it was really fun, and I loved it. And I kind of did a little stand-up, but it wasn't stand-up per se. It was like I was hosting the shows and just chatting with the audience. And then I did stand-up at the end of the 70s about 3 or 4 times. and I wasn't great at it, but I had fun loving it, and then I quit, and then I started again on July 29th, 1984. So it has been 37, and when you say 45, in a sense, I've been involved in the comedy business for like 44 years, but it's been 37 in a row doing stand-up.
Good. Woo! I don't have to apologize. Good.
Yeah, no apology necessary. I'm looking at my under eyes going, I slept a lot today. I went, yeah, you look like you've been doing comedy for 45. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just drove back from South Florida, so.
Oh, my God.
Little peek at myself.
Yes.
But that was actually my first question was, where did it all start? When did it all start? Where was it?
At Emerson College in Boston. When I was a freshman in college, I went to school for broadcasting, journalism and, broadcast journalism mostly. And it was really fun. Did the news and was learning how to write the news. But then all of a sudden, I met some friends like the beginning of college, and we all hit it off immediately, and we formed a comedy group with us. And it was wildly successful immediately. And it just became the biggest thing in our school. So while I was at Emerson, Norman Lear had gone to Emerson. So many comics had gone to Emerson. Before us, there was Andrea Martin from SCTV and Jay Leno, and Norman Lear was there, and Henry Winkler, and all these people. And then when we were there was Dennis Leary and Mario Cantone and Stephen Wright and Lauren Dombrowski, who ended up head writer for Mad TV. And then just as soon as we were done, there was Laura Keitlinger and Bill Burr and Anthony Clark and David Cross. And it just kept getting, Jen Kirkman. I mean, just one great comic after another. So, it was that era, that 1975 was the first year of Saturday Night Live. Right. And I started in 76. So the head writer at Saturday Night Live was Marilyn Suzanne Miller, who also went to Emerson, and she kind of helped us. It was really great. It was, we came in at the right time.
So you were doing sketch comedy?
Yeah, it was doing mostly sketch, and it was really fun. And we were working our asses off, and it paid off because we were very popular. And like Doug Herzog, who was the president of Comedy Central and the president of Fox at one time, and he recently said in an article that it was some of the funniest shows he's seen in his entire life. And that was back in the late 70s. So it's a nice compliment.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Who were some of your inspirations at that time in the late 70s and the early 80s?
Well, George Carlin and Richard Pryor were the main comedy influences, but there was also Jonathan Winters and Lily Tomlin. But I watched comedy. My parents were very funny, and especially my mom, and they had a lot of comedy albums around the house. And, we listened to Mother's Brothers and Flip Wilson, and they also had, like Pryor and Red Fox, the sort of naughtier stuff that kids aren't supposed to allow, but they listen to, but they allowed us to do so. And so we got some, and they took me to some comedy shows up in the Catskills. We went a couple of times, and it was kind of, there was always something. I never thought it'd be a stand-up. I never thought it'd be a job, but I loved doing it. I loved being around it. And I remember seeing early on, I guess 71, when I was living in Hollywood, Florida, I saw Carlin on Letterman on Carson. What a faux pas that is. What a perfect fit.
We're going to talk about that
same guy, same Midwestern superstar broadcaster. But I saw him when he was plugging his FM and AM album. And that was the album that made me go. As you see, the wordplay, I thought, oh my God, another guy who does wordplay, and he does it really well. And I wanted to be like that.
Yeah, I remember Carlin being an early influence when I was young too. I was listening to Class Clown and Cheech and Chong, the Big Bamboo album and the Wedding album. We had those, and again, we would listen to them when our parents weren't around. And but I never, like you, I never thought that I would end up being a stand-up comic.
Right.
I was interested in performance, in acting when I was young, but I never thought that I would end up being a stand-up comic, and I did it for many years.
Yeah.
So, right. How about Renee and Jonathan? Do you guys perform? Or I know, Jonathan, you play music.
Yeah,
That's a giveaway.
I play music, but I'm not really comedically inclined per se. I think Renee is more in line with that.
Yeah, so yeah, I do, talk shows hosting and then music and then some stand-up comedy, getting back into that, and then some modeling and acting too, stuff like that.
Yeah,
she actually writes music. She's a very good songwriter.
Thank you.
And a lot of people
Very
record
nice.
her songs. And she's a very talented musician as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's very cool. Yeah, I'm really involved in so much. I also have been writing music for like 40 years. My best friend and I, who I met in college in the comedy group, and we've been writing music. And I like producing and creating and singing and performing everything. And started getting into photography last year. If there's arts to it, I just find myself drawn to that. The only thing I've had trouble doing is like actual art, where I take painting and create from that. And it's something I would love to do, just to be able to say I've done all of those things. And who knows?
That's what Rory does. Rory's a great painter.
Nice.
He does a lot. Yeah.
I do some instructional painting videos on Socially Distant Fest. You might want to look them up.
Like Bob Ross, kind of. Like
They've inspired other people to actually
Very
pick up
nice.
brushes and try some new stuff. So
he's very good.
I don't understand. My brain doesn't, I can't wrap it around how you can create. I understand the whole idea of creating and how my brain works for the other stuff I do, but I don't see how my brain works for the art. Like, I have two best friends in the world, and one has passed in 2015. And it was Chris Phillips and Adam Roth, and they both played music with Dennis Leary. In fact, Chris wrote the Asshole song with Dennis. The four of us, the four of us were all.
I love that song.
The four of us were all friends in college, and we were all in the comedy group. And Dennis was a year older than myself, and Chris and Adam and myself were all freshmen together. Now, Adam was a very good artist, but his father was a very famous cartoonist named Arnold Roth, who you've seen him in Mad Magazine and also in Punch Magazine in England and National Lampoon. And he's, so they're in my family, the Roths and Chris Phillips' family. And so we would go to a party at the Roths, and they would have all the cartoonists from Mad Magazine or TV Guide, or who wrote who did the covers of all the great things. And I just never can. I don't know why. I tried, but I can trace. But I'm very good at tracing.
I could never draw either. I'm so envious. I wanted to be a cartoonist when I was a kid. I would get all the books. This is how you draw the horse, and I can't do it. My brain doesn't work that way, and I'm very disappointed in myself for not.
Yeah, me too. It's weird when
it's a disappointment.
You're like me a lot, because I want to do everything. I host. Me
too.
All of it, and then when I can't do something, I get not mad, but I'm frustrated.
Disappointed.
Yeah.
Like, why? Mm-hmm. Why is it that one thing? But I wanted to ask you, Eddie, how did you get the courage to go full-time into entertainment? Because that's a very tough decision.
Yeah, I was, I came to New York and I got into advertising for a while, and I hated to lie for a living. I wasn't getting paid. I wasn't getting paid very well. I'm a
lawyer, so
I'd written commercials, and I had done voices for them, and came up with jingles that were, on the radio. I'd wake up on my clock radio in the morning, and I'd hear the music that we wrote, and it was very satisfying. But financially, it wasn't good, and my boss was really, a real misogynist and kind of aloof, and it wasn't really exciting working for that company. The head writer was not really that talented. In fact, he hated me because he did some presentation, and I laughed so hard because it was so stupid. I shouldn't have laughed. I should have been more of a team player, but I couldn't help it. It was so stupid.
It wasn't a comedy presentation.
No, it wasn't. It was supposed to be. He was trying to be funny, but it was so bad that
it was funny for the wrong reason.
Right. I've laughed out of turn on a few different occasions that I remember very well that I shouldn't have. There was one time there was this competition in Boston comedy competition, and I love the accent. It makes me laugh. My friend Bobby went down to play shortstop, and Kurt was playing first base, and that whole thing. And I went to college in Boston, And there was a guy on stage, and I was one of the judges. And how can you judge comedy or art? I still don't understand it. But I was picked as a judge, and the guy was talking about SARS. If you remember, in Toronto, they had that SARS. And this guy said, "Saz, the guy's got fucking Saz." And I lost it because he said Saz. And no one was laughing because they all get it. They're from Boston. They have that accent. You know, the guy from New Kids on the Block was next to me, and he was like, "Yeah, why are you laughing?" And no one laughed, the more I laughed. And the whole crowd was like, "You're ruining this kid's chance." You know, Saz, that fucking Saz. And then, you know, our good friend Dick Warren, who grew up with Adam Roth, we loved his father so much. And his father was, you know, when he passed away, we went to the funeral, and we were, you know, drunk from the night before. So that's not an excuse, but we looked like, you know, coming out of a Tarantino film. We're all wearing black suits, white shirts, and just hung over. And we show up at the wedding, and the priest was amazingly nice guy. We all met him before. And then he started singing. Well, he would talk with a deep voice and was very nice. And when he sang up here. And he did this. And we thought it was a joke. It's like, you remember Gomer Pyle? I don't know if you remember. Gomer Pyle. Surprise, like this. Surprise. And then when he sang like this. Well, this guy was a reverse Gomer Pyle. And we couldn't believe that he was like, la, la. And then he would stop and talk deep again. And you know, Father, hallowed be thy name.
Gomer Pyle.
And we just, yeah, and we loved Jack, and when the whole family was there, we were biting her, and we were just laughing our ass, so we had to run out of the church. So,
that's same here. I was laughing so hard I couldn't stop. I had to run out of the church.
So funny. I like reverse Gomer Pyle. That has to be a character. Reverse Gomer Pyle. You need to go hard with that.
You could, and be hard with that. You could. Yes, do the old reverse Jim Neighbors.
I think he would have won Star Search.
Probably.
What a segue.
What a great segue.
Star Search, and how was that experience?
You know, the best part of Star Search, the best part of waking up is going back to bed. No, the best part of Star Search is I got to go to LA. I got to go to LA, and I was put in a pressure situation. You're performing in a competition, and you know, I was excited with what I did, and I was proud of what I did, but I didn't move on to the next spot. But I didn't want to leave Los Angeles without accomplishing something. And I went over to the Comedy Store and the Improv and auditioned for them. And they both liked me enough that the Improv said, if you move to LA, we'll use you all the time. And the Comedy Store said, you're welcome here all the time, whether you live here or not. So I chose the Comedy Store. I chose the Comedy Store and spent a lot of my life in that building. Mitzi Shore, Paulie's mom, put me up in the house right behind the Comedy Store, and the Comedy Store was my living room. So the greatest comics in the world every night, would come by.
Yeah.
Eddie, I have a question because I've heard I'm a big comedy fan. I've heard several comics talking about just the feeling of having Mitzi Shore there watching you. Was it intimidating at all the first time she watched you play?
The first time, because I don't know her. And, you know, sort of the history of her. But I didn't really know that much about her and her husband, Sammy, you know, and Paulie was he was a young kid. He wasn't a comic yet. And we would actually all babysit him at one time or another. But the truth is, it was kind of cool because it was like family. And Mitzi had a house that she owned behind the Comedy Store that was once owned by Errol Flynn. And her daughter, Sandy, lived there. And there was a basement area, and me and this guy, Tom, we shared that basement place. And Tom was a great guy and also ran the box office at the Comedy Store. And so he, like, if someone didn't show, he'd go, Eddie, there's a spot open, you know, go, you know, come up and do the spot. So I worked a lot. But the original question was Mitzi intimidating? She was, but, you know, she liked what I did. And that was really great for me because I went with confidence out there doing, you know, knowing that she liked what I did, and it worked out beautifully.
most people that talk about her say she was very down to earth, very nice lady.
Yeah.
You
She
did
loved
have to
comedy.
be funny.
You had to be funny, and but she, like in the days working with David Letterman, we talked a lot about working in the Comedy Store and how Mitzi was really great to us, but she wasn't great to other people, and you can't be great to everybody, and some people might not like her, and she had done some things, that you wish she didn't do or whatever. But that's with every boss, or even with ourselves.
Now, you spent some time here in Florida, and down here in Florida, they used to always tell us to make it in the business as a comedian, you need to go out to LA, you need to do the 3 I's, or you need to go out to California and do the 3 I's, Igby's, the Ice House, and the Improv. Was that true, or was that just BS?
No, they were all good clubs. Igby's was a great club run by an incredible guy named Jan Smith, who really loved comedy and loved comics and treated us with huge respect and put incredible shows together. And I loved it. And Igby's was West LA. So it was away from the downtown area where you had the Comedy Store and the Improv. But it was such a great club to work, and it was set up so beautifully. And it was a great restaurant. I just loved the name. It was an Indian place called A Taste of Chutney. And I always think of the Beatles song, A Taste of Honey. And I drive by A Taste of Chutney, a taste much sweeter than wine. But so Igby's was great. The Improv was pretty big, but the Comedy Store was equally as big. So I just happened to choose the Comedy Store because of one night, they told me that.
Lucked out, got in there and got a regular standard gig. Yeah.
Right. The Ice House was in Pasadena, still is. And it's known throughout the history of comedy to be one of the greatest comedy clubs in the world. And you really have to suck to bomb at the Ice House, because, in fact, the word was that a lot of bookers wouldn't take tapes from the Ice House because even if you sucked, the audience was so great.
The audience was fantastic.
Yeah.
I had never heard that. I mean, I know that Pat Paulson, that was like his home club.
Yeah.
And it was in
there a lot. It was in the suburbs, It was in the suburbs. In New York, you have like 14 clubs in one, small section of the earth. And in LA, the Improv and the Laugh Factory kind of started when I was out there. And it was a different room. They had half the building, and it was a different setup. And Jamie Masada, who runs the Laugh Factory, had asked a couple of us from the Comedy Store to come by and help him at the beginning when he was first starting out. So me and Stephen Pearl, who was a great comedian, who still is a great comedian, who helped me when I first moved out to LA, the two of us would stop by the Laugh Factory because we wanted stage time. We're rabid comedian fans, and we knew that you had to outwork everybody in order to have a great career.
Now, you actually had your own club for a while, am I right?
Yeah, well, that's what in 1984, I was in New York. I was working for my father at an electronics wholesale place. I was making good money, and I was not thrilled, but I had, had a lot of fun, a lot of friends. I was making good money. I left the advertising agency to work for my father, but it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't a job that I loved. It was a job that I couldn't wait to be over and then get the money and then enjoy New York City. When I had that kind of money as a young kid, it was fun because I got to go to Broadway shows and go to sporting events and do a lot of things that if I didn't have money, I probably would have never had that experience. And it was really great. But a guy I went to college with, Emerson, Joe Mauricio, was working at a restaurant in the Village, and they told him they're going to use the basement room to do some performance stuff. And so he called me up and said, would you like to start a comedy night there? And I met Colin Quinn the very first week. Adam Sandler went to school down the street at NYU. And Susie Essman was just kind of starting out.
I love her. I'm addicted to Susie.
Yeah, she's amazing. And we've known each other, since '84. And then, all the people I went to college with in Boston, Mario Cantone and Dennis Leary, and all of them would come down from Boston. And eventually I gave the club up because I decided to move to LA. And I gave it to Barry Katz, who turned it into the Boston Comedy Club.
Holy
So my club was
What?
the club that became the Boston Comedy Club.
But it was called Paper Moon before that, right?
Yeah, Paper Moon. And then the owner, some new owners came in and they ruined the place by putting the comedy upstairs. They wanted to put music downstairs, and the music bled through to the upstairs.
Oh man!
And we had to change the name from the Paper Moon to we called it Only Joking, which is kind of interesting. It was a weird name, and that's what I call my show on Sunday nights, just as a homage to that time. And then Barry, was living in Boston at the time, and he decided to call it the Boston Comedy Club. But I had it downstairs. It was an incredible room. We rebuilt the room just for comedy. And we had a great lighting person and a great sound person, and every little bit of that place, there was a reason why something happened, why the music was a certain way, why the staff was really charming, and everyone had a good time.
Well, having done a gig in a bowling alley, I think it was a Coconuts gig, I can attest. It really works much better when you got the sound worked out.
I've done all the Coconuts, but I never got to do the bowling alley.
Yeah, it makes a difference, a big difference. Was there anyone that you met? You've met so many people. You've met everyone. Was there anyone you met who you just you peed your pants? You were like, I can't believe I am meeting. I mean, did you ever get starstruck, or are you so?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I had met someone, I'm not going to mention their name, and they kind of was condescending when they talked to me. And I had been doing comedy for a while. So I vowed to try to not, I was like, I was trying to over respect the person, and they were like, oh, you'll do well or whatever. It was just weird. But that same night, Norm Macdonald was working at a club, and as I turned the corner, I saw him, and I stopped and I practiced going, hi, my name's Eddie Brill. I'm a big fan. Hi, I'm Eddie Brill. Nice to meet you. I was practicing, and just as he saw me on the corner, he goes, Eddie Brill. And he came up to me and he was like, oh, I'm such a fan of your comedy. And I was like, that was my line. Wow. That happened to me another time. The same exact thing with Billy Connolly from Scotland. And I was working at Letterman, and Billy Connolly was a guest because he was in the movie Mrs. Brown. Yes. So he was an actor in the thing. And I really loved him. And we had a lot of mutual friends because I worked in Europe. Starting in 1991, I started working in Europe a lot. And around the world. And so I worked in Scotland and England and Ireland a lot. Gigs in Paris and Amsterdam, based out of the British clubs, out of London. And so when Billy came by, I loved his comedy, and he was just such a funny guy and ad-libber, and I heard he was an amazing person. So I practiced. I go, Billy, my name's Eddie Brill. I'm a comedian. We have mutual friends. I was literally practicing to not make a fool of myself. And he walks through the door and goes, oh my God, it's Eddie fucking Brill. I can't believe you're here. What are you doing here? It was so cool. So that's happened to me twice. That's really nice.
That's awesome.
You had an early gig, a last minute gig that you got where you got to meet some serious celebrities.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Tell us about that.
Yeah.
This is one of your best
stories. I have to lozenge it up because of my throat. Excuse me. So I'm in LA at the Comedy Store, and have a decent set, nothing spectacular, just decent. And this couple comes up to me and says, we came here to see the guy before you, and he wasn't our style, and we liked your comedy. Would you do the show? What I thought I heard, the Shriners, on Saturday. And I said, sure. And it was like $200. And at that point, probably had 35 cents to my name. So $200 was amazing. In LA, we didn't make a lot of money at the Comedy Store, but you were there to work and work on your stand-up. So this is 1987, and there's no cell phones or GPSs or anything. It was a Thomas Guide, which is this book you use to find out where you're going. And I went to this place. I don't know if you know who the Shriners are. They're these clubs like like
St. Jude kind of.
Yeah. And they do, they do a lot of community service, and, they're good people, and, it's like the Elks Club and all that kind of stuff. So I was all ready. I dressed up kind of nice, not fancy. And as I'm getting closer, I look at this building that's supposedly the address, and it's like football stadium, like kind of a place. It was the Shrine Auditorium. I misheard them. It wasn't Shrine.
No.
And the Shrine Auditorium is where the Academy Awards were held. And it was an 8,800 seat venue. And I went to the back door and knocked to ask to talk to somebody. I go, "Hi, my name's Eddie Brill." And Mr. Brill, follow us. No, I've never been called Mr. Brill. And
there you go.
And they took me up these rickety stairs of this old classic building. And I'm passing the dressing rooms of other people. And it's the Shirelles and the Coasters and Jerry Lee Lewis and Jimmy Stewart and then Eddie Brill. And I'm like, is this a joke? I mean, it really, I was shocked. And I went into the room, closed the door, and I was like, what's going on here? And the room was pretty much empty except a sink and a fridge of water and a piece of paper on the desk with the order of the show. And I'm following Jimmy Stewart, and I'm thinking, what does he do?
Oh, my God.
So the stage manager comes up in the room, and I go, what is this? He goes, the benefit. And the police, local police in our area, they do it every year. And Joey Bishop was the comic tonight, but he got sick. And we asked if you would do Joey Bishop, or, he was the Rat Pack Sinatra guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, every new moment is more ridiculous than the next. And he says, I'm going to bring you downstairs. And when Jimmy Stewart's on, and I'm going to, when they start when Jimmy's finished, start walking toward the middle of the stage. It was so big that you had to get out there. It was really a big stage. Luckily, there's a comic named Vic Dunlop, who was a great comic in LA, and he was hosting the event off camera. I mean, it wasn't on camera, but off stage. He had an off stage mic. He would announce the comics or the guests. So I was like, oh my God, Vic, he said, Eddie, this is a sweet gig. It's fantastic. He says, my one suggestion is to really be deliberate in your delivery, because it's so many people and it takes time for the words to get to the back of the room and then come back, which was the greatest advice. I probably would have rushed through it otherwise.
Yeah.
And so Jimmy Stewart's up on stage and he's reading his poetry like, once a beautiful flower, lovely trees. And he's, oh, lovely. And I couldn't believe that he was on that stage. So they start announcing me when he's done, and he walks by, he looks at me, and I look at him, and I give him a head nod. I don't know what to do. And he gives me a head nod back, and I'm like, oh my God. And then I go up, and luckily I had a really good set. It was so good because Dunlop told me that great advice. And I swear to God, a tear came to my eye when I never had that much applause.
Wow.
I got 8,800 people laughing. It was so powerful that it was emotional. Mm-hmm. And I was having the time of my life. I was dancing up there, It's just it was like Enrico Palazzo in Naked Gun, like I'm dancing back and forth. Everything's going great.
Yeah.
And then when I got off stage, I started walking off, and Jimmy Stewart was down the side of the stage, and he stayed and watched the whole thing. He was like, very funny, Eddie, very, very funny. And I couldn't believe it. And then Jerry Lee Lewis pushed him out of the way and said, you're very funny, son. And you mind if I take my picture with you? And it was ridiculous.
Oh, my God.
It was ridiculous.
Jimmy Stewart out of the way.
He pushed Jimmy Stewart out of the way.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm getting Eddie Brill.
Yeah, and it was so great. And then when it was over, I couldn't believe what happened. I wish people were with me. Luckily, Vic was there to back me up, because it was like a dream. And I went to the Comedy Store to do a 1 a.m. spot, and the crowd was drunk and horrible. And they were sucky, and some guy went, you suck. And I go, no, I don't. I just follow Jimmy Stewart.
No, I don't.
Go fuck yourself.
The best answer to a heckler ever.
You're an idiot.
That's the best
I said,
answer.
you can't take that away from me.
You cannot take that away.
Not a lot
Eddie,
of people. Go ahead.
All right. Eddie, you might have just answered the question I was going to ask, but what moment did you realize, did it hit you that you just thought to yourself, my God, I've made it in this business? That might have been the time it happened, but
yeah, I mean, it was the key is when you deliver in a big spot is important. It's you're not competing against anybody else. You're competing against yourself. And there were times in my life where I've had great moments. Like I remember, I was in Massachusetts and I was doing 2 gigs back to back in 2 different parts of Massachusetts. And the first gig was like at 7 and the next one was at 9. And after I was done with the 7 o'clock gig, I really had a great time. It was a sweet, sweet gig, paid decently, audience was great. And that's really the most important part of that equation. And I'm driving in a car, a rented car, to the other gig. And I'm laughing, and the music's playing in the car, and I was laughing, and it was great. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm doing what I love. On my way, that car ride, I can picture it. I know the feeling going, look, I'm doing what I love, and I'm really happy that I'm doing it. And then the second show was great, too. It was one of those nights. Excuse my lozenge.
What I was going to say before was not a lot of people have a Bobby De Niro story, but you have a great Bobby De Niro story.
Well, you know, it was a result, part of the story is a result of the Jimmy Stewart story. When I was a kid, I worked at a movie theater because I love movies so much. And I was only 14 and I looked like I was 8. And you had to be 16 to work, you know, legally. But it was, you know, not a lot of people wanted the job of the movie theater because they paid $1.40 an hour because they had a law in Florida that if you worked as an usher at a movie theater, you got paid the same as a waitress without tips. Excuse me. And so, you know, one of the great things before I started working in a movie theater, I would go to movie theaters in the neighborhood and try to get in rated R movies, not because I want to go to a rated R movie. I wanted to see the best movies, and a lot of them are rated R. So what I would do is I would go to the movie theater a little early and ask couples who were coming in to bring me in with them as their, you know, guardian. I was pouring myself out front trying to.
Yeah, he's ours.
Yeah. And most people said no, of course. But every once in a while, someone would let me in. And one of the movies was, I remember it was the day before my birthday, and Robert De Niro film was coming out, and I read all about it. Martin Scorsese was a director. It was called Mean Streets. And I read a million things about it, and I really wanted to see it. And, you know, my parents were working, so I had to go by myself. And I finally got a couple to bring me in, and it was amazing film. It, you know, it really cemented my love of movies. And the script was great. The acting was incredible. And of course, as the, you know, the direction of Martin Scorsese is brilliant. So, you know, it was kind of interesting because I remember the date, you know, I don't remember the year, 74 or 73, something like that. No, maybe 72 or 73, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then I said, you know what, I can't stand in line outside the movie theater. And I got a job at a movie theater. Okay. And I saw another De Niro film when I was working at the movie theater. It was called Bang the Drum Slowly, which is one of the greatest underrated films in history. Michael Moriarty and Robert De Niro acting there like crazy together. And it was a great film. So anyway, I moved to New York after all these years. And now everyone had met Robert De Niro in New York because De Niro loves New York and he was around. And I didn't have a De Niro meeting. I never saw him in person or anything. But everyone was like, yeah, you know, my brother-in-law, yeah, I was at a shop and there was De Niro. And so after 9/11, Dennis Leary, who was my roommate in college and roommate after college, was throwing a bash to raise money for the firemen family, the men and women who were married to the fire, men and women and their families. So every New York celebrity was invited. And that was the cast of The Sopranos were pretty much there. And Richard Gere and Clarence Williams III and, you know, just so many great, you know, Matt Dillon and just every New York actor in the world was there. It was a star-studded party. And my friends Chris and Adam were going to be there. Now, it was the day before my birthday in 2001. And my girlfriend took me to see a play on Broadway. And after the play was over, we were going to go to this party and be part of it. And she dropped me off and said, look, I'm tired. You go to the party. So I walk into the party. And as I walk in the front door, I see my two friends standing there waving like, hey, we're here. And I look to the left and there's Robert De Niro. And I froze. I was like, I can't believe it. He's in real life. He's standing there. I didn't know what to do. And just as he was like shaking a couple of firemen's hands, and just as I was just coming in and I was heading toward where my friends were, De Niro turned around to leave, and he looked at me. I looked at him, and I didn't know what to do. And I remember the Jimmy Stewart thing where I did the head nod, and I did that to De Niro, and he stopped, and he grabbed me and hugged me, and gave me the best hug of my life, and didn't let go. And you saw my friends going like, you know, like we didn't know Eddie knew De Niro. You know, I mean, the whole place stopped. Who is this guy that we don't recognize that De Niro is hugging? And I'm really an incredible hug, and long and powerful. It was so good. I've had 2 really good hugs since then, but up until then, that was the best hug of my life.
Wow.
So De Niro leaves, and I'm like, and I walk up to my friends, and they go, "How do you know De Niro?" I go, "I don't know him." They go, "What are you talking about? You were having sex with him on the dance floor in front of everybody." He says, "I think,
oh no,
I think he thinks I'm Danny Aiello's son because I've been mistaken for Jamie Aiello in the past, or you know, I don't know what, you know, or maybe you're just caught up in the moment. I don't know." So all through the night, the party, I'm walking around and people are going, "Oh, De Niro, hey there, who's that guy? De Niro, oh, De Niro." And people wanted to know. And so finally I'm at the bar ordering a beer, and Clarence Williams III from Mod Squad comes up, and he goes, "Hey, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. You know, what are you going to do?" I was thinking of De Niro because it was the day before my birthday, you know, but 28 years later, or whatever many years later, after I saw Mean Streets. And so I'm talking to Clarence Williams III, and you know he's waiting to ask me how I know De Niro. I think all the actors got together and said, someone gets the short straw and ask that kid how De Niro knows him.
Yeah.
And so he finally goes, "So how do you know De Niro?" I go, "You know, from Mean Streets." And then he was like, "Oh, okay." And I wasn't lying. That's how I know
You
De
weren't
Niro.
lying.
That's the truth.
And then I just walked away into the sunset, and I met De Niro again many, many years later at Letterman. I told him the story, and he remembered the party very well because of, you know, it was an important night.
I don't remember hugging you so much, but I remember the party.
Yeah.
The fireman, you know.
But it was pretty special.
Did you mention
really that was probably a good hug for him too?
Yeah. I'm a big guy, so I give pretty good hug.
Very good.
Did he say anything about the hug? I mean, when you saw him at Letterman,
I joked with him about it, and I said, "I think you might have thought I was Danny Aiello or his son." He goes, "Oh, that's weird. I don't know." And that was, you know.
So he's not noted for hugging people for long periods of time. This was an exclusive. This was particular to you on that night. Wow.
The other 2 great hugs. One was Roberto Clemente. I'm a big baseball fan, and Roberto Clemente was my hero, and I eventually got to work for the Clemente Foundation, and I would host their events, and it was great. And Vera Clemente, who I got to know very well, Clemente's wife and his kids, I knew them, you know, we were like family. And, you know, I was a big boy and she was a large woman, and we hugged each other, and it was like we got lost in each other's hug, and it was really beautiful. And she called me Eho, and she was crying, and it was just really nice. And then the other one was the best hug I ever got. And I know it's really name droppy, whatever, but it really is the best hug I've ever got in my life. Oprah Winfrey was on the Letterman Show, and she and Dave hadn't been on the same show together for many, many years. And there was a whole thing that Letterman was like, "Is she going to come on my show?" So she finally decides to come to the show, and they have a blast together. And she's so happy and so in the moment. And so she hugged Letterman, and she hugged this other guy, Bill, who was working at the show. And then she came to me and she gave me a hug, and it was spectacular.
Wow.
Yeah.
Describe the hug.
Spectacular.
Describe it. I want to know how Oprah hugs. Is it like?
It was memorable. You know, three best hugs of my life.
Wow. How did the Letterman gig happen? How did that happen?
Louis C.K. worked as a writer and producer at the Dana Carvey show.
Yeah.
And I was the warm-up comic for the Dana Carvey show, and
Oh, man.
it didn't last long, the show. And
No, the show is brilliant. I
Brilliant.
love
I love that show. I
too
love
smart
it.
for television.
Yeah.
Too
Steve
smart for American
Colbert
television.
and,
It was a
Steve
thinking
Carell got their
man's
start
show.
on
That's
that.
the thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. It was a thinking man's show. Steve Carell and you
Love
know Robert Smigel was one of the main guys.
Right.
And so, you know, the show was over and Louis went to work for Letterman, and Letterman was like, you know, do you have a warm-up comic? And Louis recommended me.
Wow.
So I had a 6-week trial
man.
period that went 17 years.
Gosh.
So you started out as a warm-up comic, and they said, you know, would you like to book the comics?
Yeah, well, you know, I would talk. I was lucky. There was a woman who went to Emerson College like me, named Rory Diamond, who was his assistant, and he trusted her, of course, and she liked me, and she brought me to the desk, and I started very early on. In every commercial break, I would be at the desk with Dave, and you know, so we would talk a lot, you know, in the commercial breaks about what just happened, what's about to happen, or talk about the Beatles or whatever, and it was just really nice. And there was a comedian who went on, and she reminded me this the other night, Wendy Liebman, and I didn't like the way the set was prepared. And I said, I said, you know, if I was doing it, I would have put this joke here, whatever. And then like a week later, I got a phone call on our week off from the show. I remember flying to Las Vegas to do a club out there, and I got a phone call. Letterman wants you to book the comics. And it was like, it was a little bit weird at first because your life changes completely when you do that kind of a job. And I'm a comedian, you know, I book comedians in a comedy club. It's very different than booking in a show that goes right. And that's
there we go. There's a picture of you with Letterman.
That's my
We've
first
actually got
appearance.
several photos here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever did the show. And after the set, he brought me over and we talked, and it was really nice. He was very complimentary.
Can you show some of those other photos for us, Renee?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's go through here.
While you're in there with Carlin, one of your influences.
While she's doing that, Eddie, what was David Letterman like? Because I've heard
really
a lot of people.
Smart, really, really smart, really, really loyal. And you know, he really, you know, he worked really hard. He wanted, you know, he demanded us to be the best at what we did. He surrounded himself. The cameraman, the main cameraman, Dave Dorset, was Walter Cronkite's cameraman, and the writers were from Harvard, and the producers had worked with him since the beginning. And Biff Henderson was the stage manager, and you know, everybody. He was very loyal to everyone, and he, you know, he demanded we do our job. And when I worked there, everyone was so good at what they did. It was just so much fun to bring my game up to that level. And, you know, you'd want to perform for him because, first of all, the theater was beautiful and classic and intimate, and Dave was really smart and funny. And you know, every once in a while, I look down at the desk and I'd see it was Dave, and I go, "Oh, that's fucking Letterman." You know, like every once in a while, it would be like shocking. It would be, oh my God, that's David Letterman. Yeah.
Now, they had a tendency to book some very novel performers, acts on the show. What were some of your favorites?
They were all my favorites. You know, they're all like, you become like your children. You know, you find them, you know, try to break some comics, give them, you know, early break, and like Mike Birbiglia and, you know, Hannibal Buress and Camille Nanjiani. There's a guy named Joe Wong from China who I put on the show who really blew the roof off the joint. I was very proud of that. Karen Rontowski, and that's just the people that were the newer comics, and Bonnie McFarlane and all these really smart comics, because Letterman loves smart and silly. And Jake Johansson, and there's Dick Cavett.
There's
Dick Cavett. You know, Letterman taught me a lot about interviewing, and Cavett taught me a lot more. I was one of the founders of this comedy festival in Nebraska, and I created the blueprint for the comedy festival that honored Johnny Carson. So that's a picture at the Johnny Carson Theater in Johnny's hometown of Norfolk, Nebraska. And we brought Dick Cavett along because we wanted him to receive the Johnny Carson Award. Plus, we were doing magic show, and we wanted him to host the magic show because Johnny was a magician. Cavett was a magician, and he met Johnny when Johnny was doing a magic show. And so Cavett and I became really great friends, and I've known him for 13 years. It's pretty
Wow.
surreal. And he taught me a lot about hosting.
Yeah, we heard you on Clubhouse. You got him on Clubhouse. We were just freaking out the whole time. I was telling everyone in my life, I was like, you'll never guess who I'm quote unquote spending an hour with. It was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't stopped talking about it. Rory told me about it. I went in there. I was like, wow. We told Jonathan. Jonathan doesn't have Clubhouse. He was freaking out. He was like, why don't I have Clubhouse?
Yeah, because I'm a huge Cabot fan, and to just see what y'all were doing, just talking with him, it really just
amazing stuff.
Yeah, he's an amazing man, and him and his brilliant wife, and the two of them. You know, I get to hang out with them, and of course, there's Robert Schimmel in the middle.
Right.
Was, like the older brother I never had, and he liked my comedy, and he took me on the road with him everywhere, and made me a better comic. And we were working in Vegas, and Carlin was working the big room, and we were working the Catch a Rising Star Club, which is a pretty big room. But Carlin was working, you know, the many thousands of people room. And, you know, I had a joke that I did on Star Search that I wrote. And someone came up to me after it aired and said, you know, George Carlin does that joke. And I go, no, he doesn't. I know everything he does. I've never heard him do that. And I wrote it. So that week when that picture was taken, I saw Carlin at the slots, and I went up to him and I said, my name's Eddie. I'm the comic at Catch a Rising Star. And he was very loving and nice, which he's always been to comics through the history. Every comic who's ever written to him, he's written back. He's called them. He's hung out with them. Wow. So I said, you know, I have a joke that I took out of my act that I did on television. I want you to know that I didn't hear you do it. I didn't even know you did it. And it was like very Carlin joke. I was like, how can you have a word like nonchalant when this is just word of chalant? And then I act really crazy and go, boy, am I chalant. And I go like, calm down, Ray. Be like me, nonchalant. And it's very Carlin. And so he said, well, it's very smart of you, number one, to get it out of your act because people are going to think you stole it from me. And I also want you to know that a comedian sold that joke to me. And I'd like to shake the hand of the guy who wrote that brilliant joke. And it was like, turned that whole thing around on me and in a beautiful way. And then I became close to him, and that was good. And there, I was hosting an event. My friend William Stevenson, who was a great comic, who knew Chappelle when he was a kid, and was very good to Chappelle when he was a kid in D.C. And William passed away, so I threw an event to celebrate William's life and brought his family in from Detroit. And Chappelle flew himself in a private plane, private jet, to New York just to be at the party, and made a nice speech about him and hugged his family and spent the time with us and everything. And even when you know, not long ago, there was Dave Letterman was interviewing Chappelle in his new hometown, and they talked about William together, you know, and so that was pretty cool.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Want to get one more here. I got to know about, let's see, this one here. It's a cool picture.
Right. I used to work for I warmed up the sitcom called Madigan Men. And Madigan Men was, again, too smart for television. It was written beautifully. It was casted wonderfully. It was Gabriel Byrne as the main actor, a young kid who played his son, an older gentleman, I wish I remember their names, who played his father. And it was really a brilliant show about an Irish family in America. It was really brilliant and funny. And on Monday through Thursday, I'd warm up the Letterman Show. And on Friday nights, I'd warm up Madigan Men. So I got really close with Gabriel Byrne. Him and he was really good to me. And he started this benefit where they'd raise money for the Irish Arts Center in New York. And that picture of me and Fallon is from that one of the events. And Fallon I hosted every year, and Fallon was a guest, and we were just, we knew each other pretty well in comedy. And
that's awesome. Wow. It's a great photo. And then I gotta know about this one because
this was just before the pandemic.
I
was hired to. They asked me if I would book somebody for the Florida Film Festival, the Boca Raton Film Festival, I think it was called, and they also wanted me to host part of the event. so I was able to get her. It was perfect. She was amazing, just a lovely, funny, smart person with an incredible story, and got her to come down and do the festival. And my throat was pretty bad then too. I was able to pull that off, and it was really great to meet her. And she was very, very kind and spent a lot of time with the people who were there. It was pretty good.
That's beautiful.
Of the people that have left comedy, gotten out of the comedy business, or the people that we've lost over the past few years, who do you miss the most?
It's a hard question. I have, that William Stevenson guy that I talked about with Chappelle, and a guy named Vic Henley. The two of them were two of my closest friends in comedy. And so I'm really sad that they're gone. We have a poker game. We had a poker game in my house for nearly 20-something years. We were supposed to play again last night, but we moved it to later in this month. But we used to play every Monday. Every Monday. I used to host a show at Caroline's, and I'd come home. My apartment was full. William had the keys. He'd set it all up. I'd just come and sit in my chair, play all night. And Vic and William have been part of that friendship and comedy. When we do comedy shows, it'd be the three of us. We'd go on the road together, and so I miss them very much. That I miss. There's a lot of people I miss in the industry. People that I don't see anymore, like Kevin Meaney and so many people that I, what's his face from the Letterman Show? Excuse me, he was the old man who was a little crazy on the NBC show. He was just a very old man. And he talked like this, and he was just, he's very funny, and I can't believe his name slipped my mind. And he went under a different name, and I'm so sad that I can't think of his name.
I almost reached out to Johnny Dark to have him come on to say hi to you.
And Johnny Dark was great to me too,
because I'm connected to him on Facebook.
Oh yeah, he's amazing, and he does those songs that are really great. He's really incredible. He did Delilah was the one this week that he did, was really good.
I'm gonna definitely book him on the show soon.
Yeah, Clifton, not Clifton. It was Carlton. Oh God, I can't believe I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was really good to me and good to comedians, and he was very funny on the Letterman Show. And
he played the page, right?
Yeah, killing. I don't know why.
Throwing his money on hookers.
Yeah, and those Johnny. But anyway, so he was really good to everyone on the show, and great to comedians and supportive of comedians. And when a couple of people who had died while we were at the Letterman Show was very sad. But anyway, look, people die. A couple of people I love died this past week, and you just have to celebrate their lives.
Yeah,
when that happens.
And you're kind of doing that on Sundays. Tell me about your Sunday show.
Well, I got on Clubhouse. I was talked about to go be on Clubhouse this past January, and I didn't do anything about it. I didn't think it was a good way to do stand-up, because you can't do visuals, you can't use nonverbal communications, and even comedy albums have a studio audience. There's a dance you have with the comedians, and you don't have that. So I didn't really do anything. Someone wanted to start a show early on, and so somebody mentioned they were doing something on Clubhouse, and I should check it out. So I checked it out, and after like 1 or 2 days, I said, I'd like to maybe start something on there. Some people came up to me, and we came up with an idea to interview the top comics of today and the people in the industry. And now I've done, I think, 11 weeks of it, or 10 weeks or 11 weeks of it. Wow. And like I said, I learned from Letterman and from Cavett a lot about interviewing. I've done a lot of podcasts before, a lot of episodes, and I've gotten better at it by just doing it like crazy, and learn to listen more. And
you got some big names on your show too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I started with Brian Kiley, who one of the greatest writers and the monologue writer for Conan. And then Caroline Ray, Bill Burr, Stephen Wright, Susie Essman, Larry Charles, Henry Winkler, one after another. I have it. I had Wendy Liebman this past week, and I have Robert Klein. Nobody on July 4th, because of the holiday. And then the 11th, I have Klein. And then Kevin Pollak, Lewis Black, and Louis Anderson have agreed to do
wow.
And then
we got some big names coming in soon. Good.
Yeah.
We're going to be tuned in.
So
every
Sunday
time.
at 9 p.m. Eastern, Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern,
9 p.m.
I do the interview on Clubhouse, and you know, so please pop in. Also, every night at 7 p.m. Eastern, I do Instagram Live.
I was going to mention that. I was going to mention the Instagram, that it's so cool. Yeah. So everybody head on over there. I follow you on Instagram and some cool stuff.
Yeah. I didn't even know that you were around until
I'll message you. I'll message you on Instagram so you'll be connected to me. Yeah.
Because what happened was my brother's girlfriend did Instagram Live, and I thought it was kind of a cool thing. And then I watched the Patrice O'Neill Comedy Central doc. Are you okay, Rory? Fall?
I'm okay. Just a little Florida earthquake.
Calvert DeForest is the person's name from the Letterman Show. Can you remember Calvert DeForest?
Oh, okay.
Calvert DeForest,
yeah. He was the guy who passed away. Thank God I remembered it before the show was over.
There you go.
But so I decided, I was watching the Patrice O'Neill documentary, which is amazing.
Oh, yes.
An hour into it, I took a break, to grab some food and use the restroom. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go online and do a quick Instagram Live. I think it was February 19th, I think.
Wow.
And I did like 5-7 minutes, and I went back and watched the great special. And then I've done it every night since. So I've done it 140 nights in a row.
Wow.
I love getting the notification. Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. And it's just me. It's just me. I have no plans. I come on, I play, I interact, I sing, I laugh, I do whatever. And I don't know if anyone finds it interesting, but I just, my brain was turning to mush because I wasn't doing any performing, and now
eat potato chips.
Okay, there we go. I'll put a lozenge in your mouth and try to.
There you go. There you go. Eddie, one more quick question before we wrap this up. If, say, someone is coming up to you wanting to get into comedy, what would your advice to them be?
Stage time, easy joke. You get out. But a lot of people say that. But the real answer is to write, and you got to try it. And the only way to really learn how to do it is stage time. Stage time.
Practice.
Do whatever it takes to get on stage with integrity, and just do it. Because there's no other way. You can't learn it in a book. As much as they tell you, it doesn't work that way. Rickles said that. Henry Winkler said that. People have books, and maybe they help a comics to start out. You're either funny or you're not. Yeah. And the only way to really get great at it is to do it all the time. Be writing all the time and be doing stage time all the time.
Right.
And that's the way to do it. It's the only way.
Advice.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and spending an hour with us. We really appreciate it. We went a little over time because you're great, and
thank you.
I got a lot of great.
It was
stories.
a real pleasure. I'm glad my voice held out.
Yeah,
me feel better. And
I feel great. Thank you. I feel great. It's just that there's remnants of this cold, and I was in Florida, and I came back and I went home. No, flying I think did it, and then I checked to see if there was a COVID thing because I was in Florida, and it wasn't that. It's just congestion, and it turns out a lot of people have a cold. So
well, you've done all of your shows for tonight, so get to bed, young man.
Yes, dear. Yes, dear.
Look for my message on Instagram. I'm going to message you right after the show.
I'm looking forward to it. Sounds good. And I
thank you for watching
Clubhouse.
It's Casual. And tomorrow night we have Kimono My House, the BLT show. And the guest is Jonathan Phipps.
Hey.
All right.
And then Thursday, of course, One Hit Wonderful with Miss Renee Jaworski and Jonathan Phipps, and our judge, who judges very sternly, Judge Stern.
Judge Stern will be on the show.
Thank you again, Eddie Brill.
Is that person
a fantastic one for the vaults.
Well, thank you very much, and have a lovely night.
Have a lovely
You guys have a good night.
Love you all.